There was heavy silence in the room as her hand struck the final chord. Taking a deep breath, she handed the lute back to the old man and withdrew into the shadows once more. Thank you, my dear, the old man said, smiling. Now, can I have a story? The boy asked wistfully. Of course, the old man whispered and settled back to his chair. Once upon a time, there was a great god, Paladin. Paladin, the child interrupted. I've never heard of a god named Paladin. A snorting sound came from the high theocrat sitting at the nearby table. Tanis looked at Hedrick, whose face was flushed and scowling. The old man appeared not to notice. Paladin is one of the ancient gods, child. No one has worshipped him for a long time. Why did he leave us? The boy asked. He did not leave us, the old man answered, and his smile grew sad. Men left him after the dark days of the cataclysm. They blamed the destruction of the world on the gods instead of themselves, as they should have done. Have you ever heard the Canticle of the Dragon? Oh, yes, the boy said eagerly. I love stories about dragons, though Papa says dragons never existed. I believe in them, though I hope to see one someday. The old man's face seemed to age and grow sorrowful. He stroked the young boy's hair. Be careful what you wish for, my child, he said softly, then fell silent. The story? The boy prompted. Oh, yes. Well, once upon a time, Paladin heard the prayers of a great knight, Huma. Huma from the Canticle? Yes, that's the one. Huma became lost in the forest. He wandered and wandered until he despaired because he thought he was never find his homeland again. He prayed to Paladin for help, and suddenly there appeared before him a white stag. Did Huma shoot it? The boy asked. He started to, but his heart failed him. He could not shoot such an animal so magnificent. The stag bounded away. Then it stopped, looking back at him as if waiting. Huma began to follow it. Day and night he followed the stag until it led him to his homeland. He offered thanks to the god Paladin. Blasphemy! Snarled a voice loudly. A chair crashed back. Tanis put down his mug of ale. Looking up, everyone at the table stopped drinking to watch the drunken theocrat. Blasphemy! Hedrick weaved unsteadily on his feet, pointing at the old man. Heretic! Corrupting our youth! I'll bring you before the council, old man. The seeker fell back a step, then staggered forward again. He looked around the room with a pompous air. Call the guards! He made a grandiose gesture. Have them arrest this man and this woman for singing lewd songs. Obviously a witch. I'll confiscate that staff. The seeker lurched forward. The seeker lurched across the floor to the barbarian woman, who was staring at him in disgust. He reached clumsily for her staff. No, the woman said. The woman called Goldmoon spoke softly. This is mine. You cannot have it. Witch? The seeker sneered. I am the High Theocrat. I'll take what I want. Then he started to make another grab for the staff. The woman's tall companion rose to his feet. The chieftain said you will not take staff, the man said harshly, and he shoved the seeker back. The tall man's push was not rough, but it knocked the drunken theocrat completely off balance. His arms flailed wildly. He tried to catch himself. He lurched forward too far, tripping over his official robes, and fell headlong into the roaring fire. There was a whoosh and a flare of light, then the sickening smell of burnt flesh. The theocrat's screams tore through the stunned silence as the crazed man leaped to his feet and started whirling around in a frenzy. He had become a living torch. Tanis and the others sat, unable to move, paralyzed by the shock of the incident. Only Tasselhoff had the wits to run forward, anxiously trying to help the man. But the theocrat was screaming and waving his arms, fanning the flames that were consuming his clothes and his body. There seemed to be no way the little Kender could help him. Here! The old man grabbed the barbarian's feather-decorated staff and handed it to the Kender. Knock him down! We can smother the fire! Tasselhoff took the staff. He swung it, using all of his strength, and hit the theocrat squarely in the chest. The man fell to the ground. There was a gasp from the crowd. Tasselhoff himself stood, open-mouthed, the staff clutched in his hand, staring down at the amazing sight at his feet. The flames had died instantly. The man's robes were whole, undamaged, his skin pink and healthy. He sat up and looked, a look of fear and awe on his face.
He stared down at his hands and his robes. There was not a mark on his skin. There was not the smallest cinder of smoke on his robes.
It healed him, the old man proclaimed. The staff! Look at the staff!
Tasselhoff's eyes went to the staff in his hands. It was made of blue crystal and was glowing with a bright blue light.
The old man began shouting, Call the guards! Arrest the Kender! Arrest the barbarians! Arrest their friends! I saw them coming with the knight!
He pointed at Sturm. What? Tanis leaped up. Are you crazy, old man?
Call the guards!
The word spread. Did you see? The blue crystal staff. We found it. Now they'll leave us alone. Call the guards. The theocrat staggered to his feet, his face pale, blotched with red. The barbarian woman and her companions stood up, fear and alarm in their eyes. Foul witch! Hedrick's voice shook with rage. You have cured me with evil. Even as I burn to purify my flesh, you will burn to purify your soul. With that, the seeker reached out, and before anyone could stop him, he plunged his hand back into the flames. He gagged with the pain, but did not cry out. Then, clutching his charred and blackened hand, he turned and staggered off through the murmuring crowd, a look of wild satisfaction on his pain-twisted face. You've got to get out of here. Tika came running over to the Tanis, her breath coming in gasps. The whole town's been hunting for the staff. Those hooded men told the theocrat they'd destroy Solus if they caught someone harboring the staff. The town people will turn you over to the guards. But it's not our staff, Tanis protested. He glared at the old man and saw him settle back into his chair, a pleased smile on his face. The old man grinned and winked at Tanis. Do you think they'll believe you? Tika wrung her hands. Look! Tanis looked around. People were glaring at them balefully. Some took firm grips on their swords. Shouts from down below drew his eyes back to his friends. The guards are coming, Tika exclaimed. Tanis rose. We have to get out through the kitchen. Yes, she nodded. They won't look back there yet. But hurry, it won't take long for them to surround the place. Years of being apart had not affected the companions' ability to react as a team to the threat of danger. Karaman had pulled on his shimmering helmet, drawn his sword, shouldered his pack, and helped his brother to his feet. Raceland, his staff in his hand, was moving around the table. Flint had hold of his battle axe and was frowning darkly at the onlookers, who seemed hesitant about rushing in to attack such well-armed men. Only Sturm sat calmly, drinking his ale. Sturm? Tanis said urgently. Come on, we've got to get out of here. Run? The knight appeared astonished. From this rabble? Yes, Tanis paused. The knight's code of honor forbade running from danger. He had to convince him. That man is a religious fanatic, Sturm. He'll probably burn us at the stake. And a sudden thought rescued him. There's the lady to protect. Ah, the lady, of course. Sturm stood up all at once and walked over to the woman. Madame, your servant. He bowed. The courtly knight would not be hurried. It seems we are all in this together. Your staff has placed us in considerable danger. You, most of all. We are familiar with this area, around here. We grew up here. You, I know, are strangers. We would be honored to accompany you and your gallant friend and guard your lives. Come on, Tika urged, tugging on Tanis's arm. Karaman and Raceland were already at the kitchen door. Get the Kender, Tanis told her. Tasselhoff stood, rooted to the floor, staring at the staff. It was rapidly fading back to its nondescript brown color. Tika grabbed Tasselhoff by the top knot and pulled him toward the kitchen. The Kender shrieked and dropped the staff. Goldmoon swiftly picked it up, clutching it close to her. Although frightened, her eyes were clear and steady as she looked at Sturm and Tanis. She was apparently thinking rapidly. Her companion said a harsh word in their language. She shook her head. He frowned and made a slashing motion with his hand. She snapped at a quick reply, and he fell silent, his face dark. We will go with you, Goldmoon said to Sturm in common tongue. Thank you for the offer. This way, Tanis herded them out through the swinging kitchen doors, following Tika and Tass. He glanced behind and saw some of the crowd move forward, but in no great hurry. The cook stared at them as they ran through the kitchen. Karaman and Raceland were already at the exit, which was nothing more than a hole cut in the floor. A rope hung from a sturdy limb above the hole and dropped 40 feet to the ground. Ah, Tass exclaimed, laughing. Here the ale comes up and the garbage goes down. He swung out onto the rope and shimmied down easily. I'm sorry about this, Tika apologized to Goldmoon, but it's the only way out of here. I can climb rope, the woman smiled and added, although I admit it's been many years. She handed her staff to the companion and grasped the stout rope. She began to descend, moving skillfully hand over hand. When she reached the bottom, her companion tossed the staff down, swung on the rope, and dropped through the hole. How are you going to get down, Race? Cameron asked, his face lined with concern. I can carry you on my back. Raceland's eyes flashed with anger and stared at Tanis. I can get down myself, the mage hissed. Before anyone could stop him, he stepped over the edge of the hole and leaped into the air. Everyone gasped and peered down, expecting to see Raceland splattered all over the ground. Instead, they saw the young mage gently floating down, his robes fluttering around him, the crystal on his staff glowing brightly. He shivers my skin, Flint growled at Tanis. Hurry! Tanis shoved the dwarf forward, and Flint grabbed hold of the rope. Cameron followed the big man's weight, causing the limb that the rope was tied to creak. I will go last, Sturm said, his sword drawn. Very well, Tanis knew it was useless to argue. He slung the longbow and quiver of arrows over his shoulder, grabbed the rope, and started down. Suddenly, his hand slipped. He slid down the rope, unable to stop it, tearing the skin off his palms. He landed on the ground and looked, wincing at his hands. His palms were raw and bleeding. There was no time to think about them. Glancing up, he watched as Sturm descended. Tika's face appeared over the opening. Go to my house, she mouthed, pointing through the trees. Then she was gone. I know the way, Tasselhoff said, his eyes glowing with excitement. Follow me! They hurried off after the kender, hearing the sounds of the guards climbing the stairways into the inn. Tanis, unused to walking on the ground in solace, was soon lost. Above him, he could see the bridge walks, the street lamps gleaming up amongst the trees. He was completely disoriented, but Cass kept pushing forward confidently, weaving in and out among the huge trunks of the Valenwood trees. The sounds of the commotion at the inn faded. We'll hide at Tika's for the night, Tanis whispered to Sturm as they plunged through the underbrush, just in case somebody recognizes and decides to search our homes. Everyone will have forgotten about this by the morning. We'll take the plainsmen to my house and let them rest a few days. Then we can send the barbarians on to Haven, where the Council of the High Seekers can talk to them. I think I might even want to go with. I'm curious about the staff. Sturm nodded. Then he looked at Tanis and smiled his rare melancholy smile. Welcome home, the knight said. Same to you, the half-elf grinned. They both came to a sudden halt, bumping into Cameron in the dark. We're here, I think, Cameron said. In the light of the street lamps that hung in the tree limbs, they could see Tasselhoff climbing tree branches like a gully dwarf. The rest followed more slowly, Cameron assisting his brother. Tanis, gritting his teeth from the pain in his hands, climbed up slowly through the rapidly thinning autumn foliage. Tass pulled himself up over the porch railing with a skill of a burglar. The kender slipped over to the door and peered up and down the bridge walk. Seeing no one on it, he motioned to the others. Then he studied the lock and smiled to himself in satisfaction. The kender slid something out of one of his pouches. Within seconds, the door to Tika's house swung open. Come in, he said, playing host. They crowded inside the little house, the tall barbarian being forced to duck his head to avoid hitting the ceiling. Tass pulled the curtains shut. Sturm found a chair for the lady, and the tall barbarian went to stand behind her. Raceland stirred up the fire. Keep watch, Tanis said. Cameron nodded. The warrior had already positioned himself at a window, staring out into the darkness. The light from a street lamp gleamed through the curtains of the room, casting dark shadows on the walls. For long moments no one spoke, each staring at each other. Tanis sat down, his eyes turned to the woman. The blue crystal staff, he said quietly. It healed the man. How? I do not know, she faltered. I have not had it very long. Tanis looked down at his hands. They were bleeding where the rope had peeled off his skin. He held them out to her. Slowly, her face pale, the woman touched him with the staff. It began to glow bright blue. Tanis felt a slight shocking tingling through his body. Even as he watched, the blood on his palms vanished. The skin became smooth and unscarred. The pain eased and soon left him completely. True healing, he said in awe. That's the end of chapter 3.